samsaradava nalalidaloka tranaya karunya ganaganatam samsaradava nalalidaloka tranaya karunya ganaganatam praptasya kalyanam gurnanavasya vande guru shri charanarvindam praptasya kalyanam gurnanavasya vande guru shri charanarvindam 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 Mahaprabhu kirtana nitya gita vaditra madhyam manasura sena Mahaprabhu Gita vaditra madhyam manasura romancha kampasru taranga baju vande guru shri charanarvindam romancha kampasru taranga baju vande guru shri vigrahara dana nityanana shringaratanama niramajanado shri vigrahara nityanana shringaratanama Jokta sabhatam sa niyunjatopi vande guru shri charanarvindam vande guru shri charanarvindam chaturvidha shri bhagavad prasadam Satvana truptam hari bhakta sangam chaturvidashi kridvaiva trupti bhajata shadeva vande guru shri charanarvindam Sadeva vande guru shri Shradikama Bhavayarapara Madhura Lila Gunarupa Namna Shradikama Bhavayarapara Pratikshana sva dhanalupasya vande guru shri charanarvindam ne kunjayuno ratikari siddhai jayali bhiri juktir apekshaniya ne kunjayuno ratikari siddhai tatrati daksha ativalabhasya vande guru shri charanarvindam Acchadharitena Samasta Shashre Ruktastatthava Vyataiva Sadhavi Acchadharitena Samasta Shashre Into Prabhuja Priyaeva Tasya Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Priyaeva Tasya Isya Prasada Bhagavad Prasadam Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasadam Bhagavad Prasadam Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Jayam Stuvam Tasya Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Gurushi Karanaravindu Jayam Stuvam Tasya Yasatrin Sandhyam Vande Gurushi Charanaravindu Vande Gurushi Charanaravindu Charanaravinda Vande Guru Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Nama Krishna Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatarisha Tarine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Pachatarisha Jaya Shri Krishna Chai Tanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Gadadhar Shivasari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Krishna Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Yaraya Namah, Krishna Jadavaya Namah, Jadavaya Madhavaya Krishavaya Namah, Gopal Govindaram Shrimadusudam, Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita, Hare Guru Vaishnava Bhagavad-Gita, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhakta Raghuna, Shri Jiva Gopala Bhata Dasa Raghuna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Prabhupada Astutara Sri Shishimar, His Divine Grace, Abhacharamina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki, ISKCON Pratishta Bhiviti Samstapaka Char Vaishnav Saramani Patita Pavana, Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj ki, Shri Gauriya Guru Vargapati Tudhari ki, Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sadgoswami Prabhu ki, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrendi ki jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासारि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय। प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद स्मरण गौरंग चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि अवतार की जय। गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरिनाम संकीर्तन जग की जय। जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। बृहद दंग ट्रांसडेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गुप्तना राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय। श्री ब्रज भूमि वृंदावन मथुर धाम की जय। The Lordship श्री श्री राधा नील माधव की जय। शीश माया पूर्णवद्वीप एक चक्रधाम की जय। परम करुण श्री गौर निताय की जय। श्री पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय। श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु स्मस्पद्रदेव सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय। भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन कर्ण सिंह भगवान की जय। सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान जी की जय। जगंगा माई जमुना माई की जय। तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री मथुरा रानी की जय। समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौरी प्रमानंदे। All glories to the assembly bodies. All glories to the assembly bodies. All glories to the assembly bodies. All glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Kaladayine. Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha. Shilatanka nakalaye. Ito narsimha parato narsimo. Ito nisinga parato nisinga. Yato yato yami tato narsimha. Yato yato yami tato narsimha. Bahir narsimho hridaye narsimho. Bahe narsimho hridaye narsimho. Narasimha madem sharanam papade. Narasimha madem sharanam papade. Tavakara kamalavarena-kam adbhuta shringam. Dalita hiranyakashipu tanuvringam. Keshavadrita narahari rupam. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Tavakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Shringam. Dalita Hiranyakashipu tanuvringam. Kesavadrita narahari rupam. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Keshavadrita narahari rupa. Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare.
Jaya Kesavadruta Naradirupa, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare, Jai Jagadisha Hare.
Jayo Narasimhadev, Jayo Narasimhadev, Jayo Narasimhadev, Jayo Narasimhadev.
Jaya Nrsimhadev, Jaya Nrsimhadev, Jaya Nrsimhadev, Jaya Nrsimhadev.
Jayo Prahlad Maharaj, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj, Jayo Prahlad Maharaj.
Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Jai Shri Bhakti Pada Sarvignash Kanishangare Bhagavan Ki Jai. Jai Bhakta Shrestha Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai. Puradi Praman Ki Jai. Shri Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrindari Vikija.
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi. Namo Namaha
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi. Namo Namo.
Namo Namaha नमहा
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namah
राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी
Radha Krishna se Vapava Eyavi Lasi
राधा कृष्णा सेवा पावो ए अभिलाषी
Radha Krishna se Vapava Eyavi Lasi
जे तो मारा शरण लोय तारा वंच पूरण होय
Chitamar Sharanana Taravancha Purna
कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन बासी
Tumi Kripa Kori Karatare Vrindavana Vasi
मोराए अभिलाष दिलास कुंज दियो वास
Mora Avila Vilas Kunje Diyova
नयने हरि बो सदा जुगल रूपरासी
Aminayane Ribosada Jugala Ruparasi
ए निवेदाना धारो साखीर अनुगाता कोरो
Eni Vedanadara Sakirayanu Gatakoro
सेवाधिकारा दिए कोरो निज दासी
Sevayadi Kara Diye Kara Nijadasi
दीना कृष्ण दासे कोय ए जीना मोरा होय
Dina Krishna Dase Kam Hey na Mora
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जीना भासी
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sada Ye Navasi
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा जीना भासी
Shri Radha Govinda Preme Sada Ye Navasi
यानी कानी च पापानि ब्रह्मा हत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Yanikani Sapapani Brahmakari Kanisa Danitani Pranasanti Pradakshina Pade Pade
यानी कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मा हत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Yanikani Sapapani Brahmakari Kanisa Danitani Pranasanti Pradakshina Pade Pade
यानी कानि च पापानि ब्रह्मा हत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे
Kani kani sapapane Brahmatari kani Tane tane Pranasanti Pradakshina Pare Pare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Nityai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nityai Gaura Hari Bol.
Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Nityai Gaura Hari Bol. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai.
Jai. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priya Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prari Devi Satavatai Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priya Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prari Devi Satavatai Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prari Devi Satavatai Namaha. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki. Oh Tulsi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to attend the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Where we take shelter of you as wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make me resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that also give me residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision I would always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower carry damsels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna prays. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govind. Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Krsna ki Namo Bhagavad-Gita Krishna Prema Krishna Krishna Chaitanya. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of a conditioned life with beauty of birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it sprays the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can rain the whole benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds, millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There is not even hard and fast rule for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy name. But I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. Once we chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself a Lord and stroll in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige. He should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause of devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharajananda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet some or other I am following this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your Lord's feet. O my Lord, but with my eyes will be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your holy name. Will my voice choke up, and will the hairs and my body stand on the end of the recitation of your holy name? O Govinda, feel your separation. I'm constantly a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he sure remains so, even if sunders me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything. He is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri 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 Krsna ki jai. There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that must be avoided. They are as follows. 1. Blaspheme, dedicate life, or forgetting the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the names of the demigods, Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. Blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures and pursuance of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities offered in Vedas as fruitive activity, karma, kanda. 9. To instruct the frivolous person about the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names, and to maintain material attachments, even of understanding so many instructions in this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let
Now
us
let's
offer
offer most humble obeisance
presents
to
unto all the Vaishnavas.
devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vancha kalpa tirabhyascha, kripa sindhu bhyeva patitanam pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, namo namaha Vaishnava Thakur ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Janma yasya yato nivayad itaratas charte suavigyaswarat.
Janmadya sayatam vayaditarataschatir swavigyaswara.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muyanti Yatsurayaha.
Dinne Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Mojantiya Suraya.
Tejo Varimidam Yata Vinimayo Yatrati Sargo Mrisha.
Tejo Varimnida Jata Vinimayo Jatra Trisargum Risa.
Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva,
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva,
O all-pervading personality of Godhead,
O all-pervading personality of Godhead,
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute
and the
truth
primeval cause of all causes.
and the primeval cause of all
Of the
causes,
creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
of the creation, sustenance, and destruction to manifested
He is
universe.
directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all
And he is
manifestations.
independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
It's she only who first imparted Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahmaji,
the original living
the
being.
original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into
As one
illusion,
is bewildered by the illusory representation
as one is bewildered by the illusory
of
representation
water seen on fire or land seen on water.
of the water seen with fire, of land seen water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universes,
temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature,
temporarily manifested by the reaction of three modes
appear
of nature,
factual although they're unreal.
appear factual, although they are
I
unreal.
therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
And therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri
who
Krishna,
is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
which is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation of material
I
world.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita kaitravottra,
Dharma Prujita Kaitavutra,
paramo nirmatsaranam satam,
Paramo Nirvasaranam,
vedyam vastavam atravastu,
Vedyam Vastavam Astravastu,
shivadam tapatrayon mulanam,
Shivadam Tapo Trayomranam,
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite,
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite,
Kim Vapurir Ishwaraha,
Kimva Paririshvaraha,
Sadyo Hridaya Varudyate Tra,
Sadyurudya Varudyatitra,
Krite Vihi Sususubhistakshanat,
Kritivhi Shushu Subhistatkana,
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activities which are material
This
motivated.
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Puran propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth is the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold mysteries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity,
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in its maturity
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
is sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
by this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpator galitam palam,
sukamukad amrita dravya samyutam,
sukamakar mrita drava sangitam,
pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam,
pibata Bhagavatam sam,
muhur aho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha.
mura hora sikha bhuvibabuka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad
The
Bhagavatam.
mature fruit of the desire to read Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit, the desire to very
It
glorious,
emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
emanated from the lips of Shishukadeva Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more
Although its
tasteful.
nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shrimvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shambhatam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Vidyantaksto Hi Abhadrani,
Vidyantastohya Bharani,
Vidunati Suhitsatam.
Vidu Noti Surit Satam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To make use of very literatures,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad-Gita,
or to hear from it directly from the Bhagavad Gita.
is itself righteous activity.
It's self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
One who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone.
acts as a best wishing friend,
Actually, that's best wishing.
and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
And purifies his body, constantly engaged in hearing with him.
Nastapresu abhadresu
Nasta Presha Bhadrishu
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Se
bhagavati uttamasloke
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke
bhaktir bhavati nastiki.
Bhakti Bhavati Nasti.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, the devotee naturally develops his dharma transcendental.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavad
and from the devotees,
and from
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in his devotional service to the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tadarajastamo Bhava
kamalobhadayaschaye chita
Kamalobhadayaschaye
etayaranavidam
Chitaitaranabhidam
stipam sattve prasidati.
Stitam Sadve Prasidati.
By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
Becomes free from the mode of passion.
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
And his material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam Prasanna Manas
Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam
Bhagavad Tattva Jnanam
Mukta Sanghasya Jayate.
Mukta Sanghasya.
When these impurities are wiped away,
His impurities are wiped
the
away.
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
The candidate remains steady in position of pure good.
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
Becomes enlivened by devotional service.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
And understand the sense of God.
Pijite Hridaya Grantis
Yante Vidya Granti.
Chidyante Sarvasamsaya
Yante Savasam.
Shiyante Chasya Karmani
Yante Sasya Karma.
Krista Evat Manishware. Thus Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of samsayam samagram, understanding the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead.
Absolute truth, personality of God.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, verse number 32. Vrido torosto dada eva lobo.
Sorry, Maharaj, the text number?
32.
32.
Dharma stano dharma patosya pristam.
Dharma stano dharma patosya prishtam.
Kastasya medram rishano cha mitro.
Kastasya midram prishano cha mitro.
Kukshi samudra girayosti sangaha.
Kukshi samudra girayo stit sangham.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Modesty is the upper portion of his lips. Hankering is his chin. Religion is the breast of the Lord, and irreligion is his back. Brahmaji, who generates all living beings in the material world, is his genitals, and the Mitra Varunas are his two testicles. The ocean is his waist, and the hills and mountains are the stacks of his bones. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. We didn't do it? Okay, well, let me just finish this. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Lord is not impersonal or misconceived by less intelligent thinkers. Rather, he is the Supreme Person as confirmed in all authentic Vedic literatures. But his personality is different from what we can conceive. It is stated here that Brahmaji acts as his genitals and that the Mitra Varunas are his two testicles. This means that as a person, he is complete with all bodily organs, but they are of different types with different potencies. When the Lord is described as impersonal, therefore, it should be understood that his personality is not exactly the type of personality found within our imperfect speculation. One can, however, worship the Lord even by seeing the hills and mountains or the ocean and the sky as different parts and parcels of the gigantic body of the Lord, the Virat Purusha. The Virat Rupa, as exhibited by Lord Krsna to Arjuna, is a challenge to the unbelievers. Okay, so do 31. Chandam syanantasya siro grinanti. Damstra yamasneya kala dvijani.
Damstra yamasneha kala dijani.
Haso janonmada kari chamaya.
Aso janonmada kari chamaya.
Duranta sargo apanga moksha.
Duranta sargo yadapanga moksha.
Translation. They say that the Vedic hymns are the cerebral passage of the Lord, and his jaws of teeth are Yama, god of death, who punishes the sinners. The art of affection is his set of teeth, and the most alluring illusory material energy is his smile. This great ocean of material creation is but the casting of his glance over us. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to the Vedic assertion, this material creation is the result of the Lord's casting a glance over the material energy, which is described herein as the most alluring illusory energy. The conditioned souls who are allured by such materialism should know that the material temporary creation is simply an imitation of the reality that those who are captivated by such glances of the Lord are put under the direction of the controller of sinners called Yamaraj. So let me read that sentence again. The conditioned souls who are allured by such materialism should know that the material temporary creation is simply an imitation of the reality, and that those who are captivated by such alluring glances of the Lord are put under the direction of the controller of sinners called Yamaraja. The Lord smiles affectionately, displaying his teeth. The intelligent person who can grasp these truths about the Lord becomes a soul fully surrendered unto him. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, so we see that there's a description of the complete body of Virat Rupa, the form of the Lord in the material nature, and comprising the whole material nature. So he has all the bodily parts that might be found in a human body, but he doesn't have a human body. So to understand this, one has to hear Srimad Bhagavatam with the purports of the Acharyas. Now we see that the human body is the microcosmic representation of the whole universe. The only difference is that it's not, it doesn't encompass the whole universe like the transcendental material body of the Lord, as Virat Rupa. So Therefore, if we understand ourselves honestly, we can understand a lot about God, up to 78%. And therefore, in ancient times, they often represented the human body as the paradigm of universal truth. It's not the universal truth, but it is a reflection of it. So, therefore, it's only when we use the body in Krishna's service can it attain its real destiny, and that is helping one go back to Godhead. If we use the material body under the allurement of Maya, then it becomes a diseased space where we suffer. So we suffer the threefold miseries. We come under the control of the modes of material nature and the laws of material nature. It's actually horrible dealing with the material body that is subjected to be controlled by Yamaraj. So that's what it says. It says, this means that as a person, he, meaning Krishna, is complete with all bodily organs, but they are different types with different potencies. When the Lord is described as impersonal, therefore, it should be understood that his personality is not exactly the type of personality found within our imperfect speculation. One can, however, worship the Lord even by seeing the hills and mountains or the oceans and the sky as different parts and parcels of the gigantic body of the Lord, the Virat Purusha, the Virat Rupa, as exhibited by Lord Krishna to Arjuna, is a challenge to the unbelievers. Yeah, because the unbelievers, they can't imagine that the Lord has a body that is transcendental. That it's not, and this is explained also more in depth in the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto. It says, Prabhupada has said that he put everything in the first canto. And actually it's a fact. If you carefully read it, you'll see that first canto, as we read it already, but we'll be going back to it periodically because it's so full of transcendental information and explanations. So if we look at the first canto, chapter 8, text 36, it says, O Krishna, those who continuously hear, chant, and repeat your transcendental activities, or take pleasure in others doing so, certainly see your lotus feet, which alone can stop the repetition of birth and death. So 1:8:36. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna cannot be seen by our present conditional vision. In order to see him, one has to change his present vision by developing a different condition of life full of spontaneous love of Godhead. When Sri Krishna was personal, so this is a very important sentence because it means in order to see Krishna, one has to change his present vision by developing a different condition of life full of spontaneous love of Godhead. So he's talking about being trained through the process of sadhana bhakti and eventually coming to raganuga bhakti when one has natural attraction for the Lord. And it says to change his present vision by developing a different condition of life full of spontaneous love of Godhead. So what's our present condition of life? Full of lusty desires for sense gratification. So somehow or other we have to change that through regulated devotional service and the strict guidance of Siksha and Diksha gurus and regular hearing every day Prabhupada says 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. And in some temples they do that, especially in the Brahmacharya ashram. Morning, afternoon, evening, they have class, besides all their other activities. So one has to change his present vision by developing a different condition of life full of spontaneous love of Godhead. When Sri Krishna was personally present on the face of the globe, not everyone could see him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Materialists like Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, Jarasandha, and Sisupala were highly qualified personalities by acquisition of material assets, but they were unable to appreciate the presence of the Lord. Therefore, even though the Lord may be present before our eyes, it's not possible to see him unless we have the necessary vision. Well, people saw Jesus Christ. How many people understood who Jesus Christ was? Maybe 12, 13, 14, 15 people. That was it. Out of all the people that saw him, there was just a handful of people that understood who he was. The necessary qualification is developed by the process of devotional service only, with hearing about the Lord from the right sources. The Bhagavad-Gita is one of the popular literatures which are generally heard, chanted, repeated, etc., by the people in general. But in spite of such hearing, etc., sometimes it is experienced that the performer of such devotional service does not see the Lord eye to eye. The reason is that the first item, Shravana, is very important. If hearing is from the right person, it acts very quickly. Generally, people hear from unauthorized persons. Such unauthorized persons may be very learned by academic qualification, but because they do not follow the principles of devotional service, hearing from them becomes a sheer waste of time. Sometimes the texts are interpreted fashionably to suit their own purposes. Therefore, first one should select a competent and bona fide speaker and then hear from him. When the hearing process is perfect and complete, the other processes become automatically perfect in their own way. So this is amazing statements here by Prabhupada, but they're absolutely true. He continues, there are different transcendental activities of the Lord, and each and every one of them is competent to bestow the desired result, provided the hearing process is perfect. In the Bhagavatam, the activities of the Lord begin from his dealings with the Pandavas. There are many other pastimes of the Lord in connection with his dealings with the Asuras and others, and in the 10th canto, the sublime dealings of his conjugal associates, the gopis, as well as with his married wives at Dwarka, are mentioned. Since the Lord is absolute, there's no difference in the transcendental nature of each and every dealing of the Lord, but sometimes people in an unauthorized hearing process take more interest in hearing about his dealings with the gopis. Such an inclination indicates the lusty feelings of the hearer. So a bona fide speaker of the Lord, of the dealings of the Lord, never indulges in such hearings. One must hear from the Lord from the very beginning. In other words, you begin the Srimad Bhagavatam and you go through it systematically. You don't jump right away to the 10th canto. Such an inclination indicates the lusty feelings of the hearer. So a bona fide speaker of the dealings of the Lord never indulges in such hearing. One must hear about the Lord from the very beginning, as in the Srimad Bhagavatam or any other scriptures. And that will help the hearer attain perfection by progressive development. One should not, therefore, consider that his dealings with the Pandavas are less important than his dealings with the gopis. We must always remember that the Lord is always transcendental to all mundane attachment. In all the above-mentioned dealings of the Lord, he is the hero in all circumstances, and hearing about him or about his devotees or combatants is conducive to spiritual life. It is said that the Vedas and Puranas, etc., are all made to revive our lost relation with him. Hearing of all these scriptures is essential. Okay, so that's a wonderful statement by Prabhupada, and it makes it clear what the process is to make this progressive, let's say, attempt to understand Krishna properly. However, in another place, Prabhupada adds more information to this. So this is the first canto, chapter 18, text 31. And it's about Maharaj Parikshit and why he put that snake around the head of the sadhu, and then he contemplated, thinking, why did I do that? So he says, upon returning, he began to contemplate and argue within himself whether the sage had actually been in meditation with senses concentrated and eyes closed, or whether he had just been feigning trance just to avoid receiving a lower kshatriya. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, the king, being a devotee of the Lord, did not approve of his own action, and thus he began to wonder whether the sage was really in a trance or was just pretending in order to avoid receiving the king, who was a kshatriya and therefore lower in rank. Repentance comes in the mind of a good soul as soon as he commits something wrong. This is a very important statement. Repentance meaning feeling sorry and wanting to atone for something that one might have done wrong. But it only comes in the mind of a good soul, of a good person. Bad people, they never repent. They never say, I'm sorry. They never try and correct themselves. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Jiva Goswami do not believe that the king's action was due to his past misdeeds. The arrangement was so made by the Lord just to call the king back home, back to Godhead. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, the plan was made by the will of the Lord, and by the will of the Lord, the situation of frustration was created. The plan was that for his so-called misdeed, that means that it was not really a mistake. It was planned by the Lord that that mistake would be made. The plan was that for his so-called mistake or misdeed, the king could be cursed by an inexperienced Brahmana boy infected by the influence of Kali, and thus the king would leave his hearth and home for good. His connections with Srila Sukadeva Goswami would enable the presentation of the great Srimad Bhagavatam, which is considered to be the book incarnation of the Lord. Yeah, we should actually worship the Bhagavatam, because it's the incarnation of the Lord in Kali Yuga. The book Incarnation of the Lord gives much fascinating information of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, like his Rasa Lila with the spiritual cowherd damsels of Rajabhumi. This specific pastime, it's talking about Rasa Lila right now, of the Lord, has a special significance because anyone who properly learns about this particular pastime of the Lord will certainly be dissuaded from mundane sex desire and be placed on the path of sublime devotional service to the Lord. The pure devotee's mundane frustration is meant to elevate the devotee to a higher transcendental position. Now that's the key, because it says that this frustration that Maharaj Parikshit felt is important. The pure devotee's mundane frustration is meant to elevate the devotee to a higher transcendental position. So, when people who are not devotees get frustrated and, let's say, angry, then they think of revenge, or they think of retaliation. This was unfair. It should not have happened. I didn't deserve this. Therefore, I'm going to punish the person that caused this suffering to me. See? But no, the pure devotee's mundane frustration is meant to elevate the devotee to a higher transcendental position. By placing Arjuna and the Pandavas in frustration due to the intrigue of their cousin brothers, the prelude of the battle of Kurukshetra was created by the Lord. This was to incarnate the sound representative of the Lord, Bhagavad-Gita. So, by placing King Parikshit in an awkward position, the incarnation of Srimad Bhagavatam was created by the Lord, by the will of the Lord. Being distressed by hunger and thirst was only a show, because the king endured much even in the womb of his mother. He was never disturbed by the glaring heat of the Brahmastra released by Aswatthama. The king's distressed condition was certainly unprecedented. The devotees like Maharaj Parikshit are powerful enough to forbear such distresses by the will of the Lord, and they are never by the will of the Lord, and they are never disturbed. They are, never disturbed by the glaring. The distressed condition was certainly unprecedented. The devotees like Maharaj Parikshit are powerful enough to forbear such distresses by the will of the Lord, and they are never disturbed. The situation in this case was therefore all planned by the Lord. So we can see that there are situations that we're going to be in this life as devotees that are that we should understand differently than the materialists do. And when a devotee is placed in a, let's say, difficult situation, he or she realizes that this is for their purification. This is not something unfair. I mean, it might look unfair, but the right way to understand it is this is for the purification, so that one becomes much more serious about Krishna consciousness. All right, and then what we read before is, if we do engage in serious hearing on a regular basis, then we will not be disturbed by the things that happen in material life. And there are many disturbing things in material life. And material life is all anxiety, Prabhupada says. Right? Okay, so, and then there are dangerous things, like, for example, someone is new to Krishna consciousness, and then they hear about the conjugal Madhurya Rasa affairs of the gopis, and they go right to that. And they want to hear more about it. Well, that is, Prabhupada says, but sometimes people in an unauthorized hearing process take more interest in hearing about his dealings with the gopis. Such an inclination indicates the lusty feelings of the hearer, so a bona fide speaker of the dealings of the Lord never indulges in such hearing. One must hear about the Lord from the very beginning, as in the Srimad Bhagavatam or any other scripture, and that will help the hearer attain perfection by progressive, that means gradual, step-by-step development. Okay, so now, to go even further, this verse today is talking about, these two verses today, talking about Krishna's universal form body. And it says, the art of affection is a set of teeth, and the most alluring, illusory material energy is his smile. So when it says his smile is the most alluring, illusory material energy, well, this alluring material energy is present in the material world and in the spiritual world. It's present in both places. But in the material world, it takes people away from Krishna, and in the spiritual world, it brings people closer to Krishna. So we're going to see what that means now. And if we look at 1st Canto, chapter 11, verse 36. So it says, although the queen's beautiful smiles and furtive glances, it's not fruitive, it's furtive. Furtive means sly, very cute, and in other words, a furtive glance is you're talking to someone, and then on the side of, then you notice a very beautiful-looking person is walking by, and you try not to show the person that you're talking to that you actually are looking with one eye at the other person, right? So it says, although the queen's beautiful smiles and furtive glances were all spotless and exciting, and although they could conquer Cupid himself by making him give up his bow in frustration, and although even the tolerant Shiva could fall victim to them, still, despite all their magical feats and attractions, they could not agitate the senses of Krishna. So he's talking about, this is talking about Krishna's queens that he's married to in a quote legal way in Dwarka, right? And these women are extremely beautiful. But as beautiful as they are, they overwhelmed Cupid himself, but not Krishna. And Prabhupada says, the path of salvation, or the path going back to Godhead, always forbid the association of women. And the complete Sanatan Dharma, or Varnashram Dharma scheme, forbids or restricts association with women. How then can one be accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead who's addicted to more than 16,000 wives? This question may be relevantly raised by inquisitive persons really anxious to know about the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. So in other words, if there's so much strict regulation of men associating with women, how come Krishna has 16,000 wives? In other words, he must be the supreme lusty person, right? Well, no. Let's hear what it says. This question may be relevantly raised by inquisitive persons really anxious to know about the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. And to answer such questions, the sages at Naimisharanya have discussed the transcendental character of the Lord in this and in following verses. It is clear herein that the feminine attractive features which can conquer Cupid, or even the supermost tolerant Lord Shiva, could not conquer the senses of the Lord, meaning Krishna. Cupid's business is to invoke mundane lust. The whole universe is moving, being agitated by Cupid's arrow. The activities of the world are being carried on by the central attraction of male and female. A male is searching after a mate to his liking, and the female is looking after a suitable male. That is the way of material stimulus. And as soon as a male is combined with a female, the material bondage of the living being is at once tightly interlocked by sex relation. And as a result of this, both the male's and female's attraction for sweet home, motherland, bodily offspring, society, and friendship, and accumulation of wealth becomes the illusory field of activities, and thus a false but indefatigable attraction for the temporary material existence, which is full of miseries, is manifest. This is a big sentence. This is a scientific delineation of the magical, alluring nature, material nature, or Maya. Those who are, therefore, on the path of salvation, for going back home, back to Godhead, are especially advised by all scriptural injunctions to become free from such paraphernalia of material attraction. That means, family, friends, relatives, houses, cars, 401ks, stocks, property, all these things. All these things bind a person to the cycle of birth and death. And that is possible only by the association of the devotees of the Lord, who are called the Mahatmas. Cupid throws his arrow upon the living beings to make them mad after the opposite sex. That means women for men, men for women, whether the party is actually beautiful or not. So, just like Prabhupada, anyway, there's a funny joke where two ugly people are looking at each other face to face, and one says to the other, "I haven't seen anyone as beautiful as you before." But they're both really ugly. So Prabhupada is alluring to that here. He says, Cupid throws his arrow upon the living beings to make them mad after the opposite sex, whether the party is actually beautiful or not. Cupid's provocations are going on even among beastly societies who are all ugly looking in the estimation of the civilized nations. And what to speak of the most perfect beauties? Lord Shiva, who is considered to be most tolerant, was also struck by Cupid's arrow because he also became mad after the Mohini incarnation of the Lord and acknowledged himself to be defeated. Yeah, he's married to Maya Devi, and Maya Devi, when she assumes the form of Parvati, is extremely beautiful, right? But he can control himself. But he couldn't control himself when he saw Mohini Murti. And he left his wife just standing there. He started running after Mohini Murti to catch her. And on the way, he also ejaculated. And he was so excited. And that droppings of his became, I'm not sure whether it's silver or gold in the material world. I think it's gold. In the material world, yeah. Okay. So, thus Cupid's influence is exerted even amongst the ugliest forms, and what to speak of the most perfect beauties. Lord Shiva, who is considered to be the most tolerant, was also struck by Cupid's arrow because he also became mad after the Mohini incarnation of the Lord and acknowledged himself to be defeated. Cupid, however, was himself captivated by the grave and exciting dealings of the goddesses of fortune, and he voluntarily gave up his bow and arrow in a spirit of frustration. Such was, in other words, when he was not able to influence Krishna or the devotees, he throws down, just like a little kid. They're doing something and they fail. They just throw down the thing. They get really angry, right? So Cupid throws down his bow and arrow because he realizes they're ineffective, although in all other cases, they were effective. So he thinks he's invincible, and then he's defeated by the Lord. Voluntarily gave up his bow and arrow in a spirit of frustration. Such was the beauty and attraction of the queens of Lord Krishna. Yet, they could not disturb the transcendental senses of the Lord. This is because the Lord is all-perfect Atma Rama, or self-sufficient. He does not require anyone's extraneous help for his personal satisfaction. Therefore, the queens could not satisfy the Lord by their feminine attractiveness, even though they were able to defeat Cupid. But they satisfied him by their sincere affection and service. Now, this is the key to everything. They satisfied Krishna by their sincere affection and service. Only by unalloyed transcendental loving service could they satisfy the Lord, and the Lord was pleased to treat them as wives in reciprocation. Thus, being satisfied by their unalloyed service only, the Lord reciprocated the service just like a devout husband. Otherwise, he had no business becoming the husband of so many wives. He is the husband of everyone, but to one who accepts him as such, he reciprocates. This unalloyed affection for the Lord is never to be compared to mundane lust. It is purely transcendental, and the grave dealings which the queens displayed in their natural feminine ways were also transcendental because the feelings were expressed out of transcendental ecstasy. It is already explained in the previous verse that the Lord appeared like a mundane husband, but factually his relation with his wives was transcendental, pure, and unconditioned by the modes of material nature. So this is all very confidential information. But the key is that the wives of Krishna and Dwarka satisfied him by their sincere affection and service. In other words, it was not by mundane sex. Okay. But yet, their furtive glances were spotless and exciting. And although they could conquer Cupid himself by making him give up his bow in frustration, and although even the tolerant Shiva could fall victim to them, still, despite all their magical feats and attractions, they could not agitate the senses of the Lord. The Lord does not engage in mundane sex. That's the message here. There's no such thing as mundane sex in the spiritual world. We've said that before when we were reading from the first chapter, from Adi Lila, chapter 4. However, there's a new twist to all this, and that is not only Krishna is transcendental to mundane things, but even his wives. And because of his absolute purity, his wives also are absolutely pure. And so his relation with his wives was transcendental, pure, and unconditioned by the modes of material nature. So, this is extremely important because now we're going to compare the wives of Krishna and Dwarka and the gopis in Vrindavan. But I'm going to leave that for tomorrow because it requires time to discuss. Because it's very fascinating to compare the two, because they're both conjugal relationships, but one is proper marriage, and the other is outside of marriage, right? Now, that would be considered most abominable in the material world, as we've discussed before. But in the spiritual world, it's the most transcendental relationship, with the full gamut of all rasas involved. Okay. So, the key, like I said, is the sentence that says, but they satisfied him by their sincere affection and service. Now, in the material world, this is the last thing I want to say today. In the material world, there's such a thing called Platonic love. I don't know if you ever heard of that. You study these things in literature, English literature, and philosophy. So, what is Platonic love? It is special. It's defined by mundane psychologists. Platonic love is a special emotional and spiritual relationship between two people who love and admire one another because of common interests, a spiritual connection, and similar world views. It does not involve any type of sexual involvement. most friendships begin as either personal or professional, and so forth. It goes on. So in other words, there's no what you would call gross sense gratification involved in the Platonic relationship. Platonic comes from the word Plato, right? Plato spoke about this 2,500 years ago, a type of love where there's no gross sense gratification involved. Well, you could say, a mother loves her child, or a father loves a child. There's no gross sense gratification involved. But this is more about a man and a woman who love each other without gross sense gratification. And okay, so would you say that this is something like the wives of Krishna or the gopis? No, because they actually have something that's called sexual activity in the spiritual world. But it's different than the material world. The material world, that sexual activity is expressed through the body, but in the spiritual world, it's expressed also through the body, but in different ways, such as the furtive glances of the gopis, of the wives of Krishna. And also, when Mohini Murti appeared before Lord Shiva, simply by her glancing at him, he became overwhelmed by a desire to grab her, basically, and embrace her. And then she ran away, and he ran after her. He never was able to catch her. You cannot catch Krishna. But it was very embarrassing for him because his wife was standing next to him when the whole thing happened. But it just shows the attraction of Krishna, and it's expressed through sincere affection and service and bodily, let's say, gestures like glancing and moving of the eyebrows and things like that, where one feels absolute ecstasy because of the alluring attraction and beauty of Krishna and the wives in Dwarka or the gopis. So that's different than platonic love in the material world. Platonic love in the material world is a noble thing, and it's something that may be desirable for in one's relationships with other people. But what counts the most is sincere affection and service. That's the thing that counts the most. And through that sincere affection and service, a very strong bond develops that is not based on sense gratification. It's based on mutual service to Krishna. So a husband and wife can develop this relationship while they're together serving Krishna. This is real psychology. This is real, what you would call family relationships. It should be based on affection and service for Krishna. See? This will purify the whole atmosphere of the world if people can understand this. The thing that contaminates the atmosphere is this gross bodily sense gratification. But when the same body is used in the service of Krishna with affection, everything becomes purified. Right? So we'll talk some more about that tomorrow and compare the gopis with the wives of Krishna and Dwarka. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai. Still, people, they found difficult really to distinction when the something spiritual are condemned materially. See?
It's hard to sell.
Yeah.
Very hard to sell.
People usually wondering why they kind of like.
Well, Prabhupada spends a long time explaining this. Right? You don't see so much of it in the Bhagavad-Gita, but once you get to the Bhagavatam, this is a big subject.
Yeah.
This is what separates, as they say in English, the men from the boys, right? Or the sincere people from the insincere people. If you can try and understand Krishna's Madhurya Rasa, and if you understand it correctly, you become completely purified. And if you can't understand it, you remain in the material world. It's the ultimate test. See? And what happens is, and this is something we'll get into tomorrow, when people hear about it, they immediately jump to the conclusion that Krishna's like me, you know. I'm lusty, I'm like this and like that, he's just like me.
Usually what they say, what's wrong with it? That's what they say. If what's wrong, they always say like, what's wrong?
Well,
if you love somebody in the material world, you know, like girl, boy, you know.
yes.
They love each other. What's wrong with that?
Well, it depends on what you mean by love. But in the material world, it's expressed through sense gratification, where in the spiritual, it's expressed through affection and service. There's a big difference. And that's affection and service can be practiced in the material world also. It's a big subject.
I see. So what's I think the thing when we spiritually trying to make advancement to understand to remove the perversion, it's because everything is perverted.
Yes.
That's the beginning of really trying to understand why material activities are condemned, because they're perverted. So instead of being enjoyer, we're not supposed to be the enjoyer, we're supposed to be the enjoyed.
Right.
That's the thing, you know.
Yeah, so it's very easy. We're living in a world of illusion, okay? But there's illusion in the spiritual world also, but you come closer to Krishna under that illusion, whereas here you go farther away from Krishna. So how do you explain this to people, right? But Prabhupada has done it. And it's done it in a very gradual way, right? I mean, we read this whole book, all of us together. We read the whole book. Do you remember all these things? No, not much. You know, that's why you have to
remember the concept, but not every single thing, but the general.
No, but now we're zeroing in on what is the actual difference between conjugal love in the spiritual world and conjugal love in the material world. We're going deeply into the subject. Because, you know, it's the same words, right? Conjugal love, right? But there's a world of difference between the two. What is conjugal love in the spiritual world and conjugal love in the material world. And by understanding this, one becomes purified. Because because there are two types of illusion, right? Illusion means you're bewildered. And we're going to hear that tomorrow about the gopis. You see the degree of bewilderment that they have. It's unbelievable.
So one thing I can just say is just really only Krishna's mercy. We have mercy. There's no way we can understand it without mercy.
Yeah, it's Prabhupada's mercy. It took all this time and effort to make this clear. I mean, the Goswamis have done it. Lord Chaitanya has done it. See, Lord Chaitanya did something that never happened before. He revealed the conjugal relationship of God. That was not, before him, it was not there. This was his mate, you know, but the word conjugal relationship augurs up the idea of mundane sense gratification, right? but it's not. And when you understand that it's not, and then even amongst the devotees, some devotees heard that you can purify your lusty desires by reading about Rasa Lila dance. So they decided only to read that, not read anything else in the Bhagavatam, right? And Prabhupada says that is a symbol that a person still has lusty desires, because they only want to read about the Rasa Lila and not anything else. So you have to go through the Bhagavatam step by step and hear all the pastimes of the Lord up to the 10th canto before you read the 10th canto. Otherwise, you jump to the 10th canto, it just shows that people are going to read it with the idea that Krishna is just like them, engaging in gross sense gratification. But it's not true.
That's what he said. I mean, you can hear it, you can read, but it must be, you must hear from the right source.
Yes.
In order to what's it called in Sanskrit? Rudaya Kama, the heart disease. I mean, it's like lust.
Yeah.
Kama.
Kama hit rogam.
Yeah. So to hear from the right source is only medicine for that.
Yes.
If you read by yourself or you hear from unscrupulous people, then actually you get the reverse effect.
Yes. That's why, I'm trying to read directly what Prabhupada says about this, because if you try and paraphrase it, it's easy to go off track. Right? But if you just stick to what he has said, and it's very profound, and his long purport, but in that long purport there's like one or two sentences. There's very, very highly intense revelation. But if you just read it quickly, you go past it. And you think, oh yeah, I read that already. But you don't really understand what he's talking about.
So Maharaj, do you think this difference, hearing and reading, so anybody can read Prabhupada's books, it's true, because it's an authorized source. But again, he said hearing is more important. There's something, but you must hear from the...
That's why it's called Shruti. Shruti means the Shastra that's heard from, bona fide devotees. Shruti.
You think anybody who can read Prabhupada books can understand?
No. No. Because it's an open secret. But it's secret as long as one is engaged in sense gratification. You can read it, but you won't understand it. It's only when you give up planning, doing, wishing, sense gratification, that it becomes understandable.
He said that if you hear from the right source and service attitude,
yes,
and hearing and serve, that's the only way we can, one can...
yeah. But it's regular hearing, because we hear and we forget also.
Oh yeah, definitely. Nityam Bhakti.
That's why we have to keep going back,
Nityam Bhakti Sevaya.
Yes,
hearing
exactly.
And service, yeah, constantly. Nityam Bhakti.
Prabhupada said, morning, afternoon, and evening. Haribol.